Throughout history, many economic systems have come and gone. Typically, these structures change after a new political power emerges, new land is discovered, or new technologies are invented. Today, I'm going to tell you something absolutely terrifying. We are in the death throes of capitalism. Take a deep breath, straighten up your focus, and watch your back, because this is the right to reason. Capitalism is an economic system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. Like anything one might study, capitalism has both benefits and detriments. For example, capitalism is very effective at reallocating resources and introducing poverty-stricken countries into the labor force that they likely wouldn't have had access to. However, the same system that gives countries jobs also takes the majority of the resources out of said countries and at a devalued rate. Capitalism also offers the diversity of products that continually get better because of competition, which is cool. But at the same time, it also leads to materialism. So rather than having a resource-based economy, products and services are only created with profit in mind. Therefore, necessities are only available to the people that can afford them. Learning about something requires a critical attitude, and you can tell that your education about a topic is under threat when only one side has been presented. Looking at capitalism in a critical perspective is known as Marxism. Feel that uncomfortability in the back of your neck whenever I said the M word? Isn't it logical to assume that you've been mind-controlled somewhat if the mere recommendation of critiquing our financial system causes you to feel un-American? By just hearing the name Karl Marx, you're afraid that Lenin's going to crash through the wall like the Kool-Aid guy? Marxist thinkers look at economics through history to evaluate and attempt to predict when particular systems fail. And despite typical criticisms alleged toward Marxism, yes, they do include communist societies of Stalin, Lenin, Pol Pot, Mao Zedong in this historical evaluation. Methodologically, finding the internal contradictions in an economic system is called historical materialism. It looks at how economics change over time. The barter system led to feudalism, feudalism led to agrarianism, and then mercantilism and colonialism were followed by the Industrial Revolution, which led to modern-day capitalism. Fun fact. The same year of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Adam Smith was writing The Wealth of Nations. You can ask yourself which one affected America more. Much of our understanding of capitalism was collected from this book, Wealth of Nations. However, many concepts were misunderstood and are still taught today in ways in which they were never intended. The concept of the invisible hand, for example, was never meant to imply that the market would direct or repair itself. Smith was actually referring to restraints on British imports. The natural result of the capitalist system is that employers will attempt to make more money by saving on labor costs through automation, hiring cheaper workers, reducing number of workers, or just reducing their pay altogether. The problem with this process is that it leads to working people having less money. Therefore, workers will not be able to afford the products and services they produce. By the early 1970s, capitalists realized that this was an imploding and self-destructive system, so they introduced the concept of credit to the common man. This, coincidentally, is also the time that wages ceased increasing with cost of living like it had done for the previous 150 years. Now, you don't need to be able to afford the fruits of your labor. You can just pay for it later. Things like cars, food, clothes, health care, student loans, and housing were all affected the most. Marx predicted this outcome in the Communist Manifesto, where he challenges the fear of the state owning property by pointing out that you don't really own your home anyway. The only people that typically do are in a different financial class, known as the bourgeoisie. This system of acquiring housing through credit eventually led to the housing collapse of 2008. The result was the $700 billion TARP bailout, which means that 300 million citizens of the United States paid over $2,000 each to the banks. Of the $183 billion that went to AIG, for example, $1.2 billion went to bonuses for just 73 AIG executives. That's 16 million each. Other facets of this bailout changed the Goldman Sachs tax rate from 34% to 1%. You got played. And we've been getting played for the last 50 years. In order to perpetuate this bloated and antiquated system, banks lobby your government to promote movements and ideologies like too big to fail bailouts, trickle-down theory, and McCarthyism. Two regularly regurgitated lies of capitalism are the harder you work, the greater your reward, or the smarter you are, the more successful you'll be. These are both half-truths, and the concepts of people that haven't really revisited their worldviews with any amount of introspection or skepticism. You must have a good work ethic, and you must be intelligent if you want to increase your chances of success and financial reward. However, it's very easy to refute the initial axiom, and it's something we deep down know to be false. For example, how many smart, hard-working old men do you know that are poor? And How many lazy idiots have you worked for that drive a better car or live in a larger house than you do? Chance plays a role in what job you work at, whether or not you're employed by a management team that will notice your benefits in the organization, whether or not your skill set is in demand in the region you work or the time period you live in, the family you were born into, whether the bank gives you a small business loan, your education level, even your own ambition isn't something that you gave yourself. Whether it's nature or nurture, one thing's for sure, your contribution to your own success is certainly minimal. This goes against the very concept of equal opportunity for all. I am aware that thinking in these terms is scary because it challenges us at a very basic level. It doesn't just cause us to doubt the system we've come to trust, but it causes us to reflect on the rudimentary concepts of free will itself, which can be disconcerting. You recognize that seeing capitalism as a litmus test for people's virtue is a silly premise when you stop thinking in terms of short and simple ideologies. Basically, if you have any worldview that can fit on a bumper sticker, you're probably not familiar with the arguments that would disagree with you. If you don't know the criticisms of your beliefs, then you don't have a good reason to believe what you believe. Another lie that's promoted by capitalism is that adherence to this process leads to freedom. But moving the labor dial from slavery to wage labor, for instance, only moves us from one form of control to another, because capitalism is always producing its own gravediggers. While job security is an illusion, wage labor, such as hourly pay, is undemocratic, because what you get paid, what you do, how you do it, and what the product does is made by a small few, not those actually doing the work. Another concept that is pushed to promote capitalism is the glory and honor of individualism, while radical democracy is more concerned with individuality. After the fall of the Soviet Union, loyalty to the capitalist system has been recharacterized as patriotism to one's country, better known as jingoism. This allowed the capitalist powers to take advantage of the U.S. labor market, aka us, people, and deceive the workers that their complicit participation in the debilitation of our rights is our own freedom. It is unfortunately American, therefore, to defend the rich, which are disenfranchising the very poor that defend them. Capitalism has convinced the poor that they are only temporarily impoverished and will all soon be rich because it takes only a little bit of can-do attitude. This particular magic trick is called the American dream. Another system that is perpetuated by capitalism is racism, and the systemic process by which rich white people tell working class poor white people that their problem is black or brown people. If they can convince you that immigrants are the problem, then you won't ever have to blame the rich landowners or bankers that created the problems in the first place. It's the idea that you may not have much, but at least you're not like them. This was the historical defense for slavery. How are you going to get a bunch of southern white boys to fight for your right of states' rights of slavery? Well, you don't want to allow those blacks freedom because then they'll take your job. This was the motto of poverty-stricken white people that didn't realize that slaves were already doing their jobs for free. This was again repeated in order to take away labor rights by threatening unions that minorities could replace them if they fought back against management. They didn't realize that introducing minorities to the labor force would only increase the size of their union. Still yet, capitalism promotes anti-science ideologies and conspiratorial distrust for scientific facts. They tried in the past to convince you that scientists were lying about cigarettes linked to cancer, that lead paint on your children's bedroom walls and toys isn't really bad for them. And now they're trying to tell you that burning fossil fuels doesn't endanger the environment. Is it really conceivable that a handful of wealthy business owners are being mistreated by the mean old scientists again, and that once again they need your help? That's the essence of business, convincing a large number of people to sacrifice for the few or the one. Employees owning the businesses they work at would actually promote environmental responsibility because they live in the areas that their factories are polluting, unlike the stockholders and board of executives that currently make all the decisions. On top of that, and as a side note, employee-owned businesses obviously wouldn't vote to move the company overseas. Historical materialism is important because inertia is not only a fact of physics, but also a fact of socioeconomics. Capitalism establishes power in the hands of the minority bourgeois class and exists through the exploitation of the working class majority. It prioritizes profit over social good, natural resources, and the environment. It is an engine of inequality and economic instability. In this now late-stage capitalist era, the remaining resources are sucked to the top, the bones of society picked clean, and the poor are distracted with reality show politicians. We're all fairly familiar with the term underprivileged. But if there's an underprivileged, wouldn't it then follow that there must be an overprivileged? One cannot simply exist without the other, but it's like we're not supposed to ask these kinds of questions. Free trade has not delivered the utopian image of what was promised And now that we're in the information age, we've become aware that we are spectators to self-destruction, as people looking at the daily obscenity of the wealth gap are beginning to ask themselves, is this really the best we can do? Hi, if you like that, I'd recommend another video called Why You Should Be a Socialist. You'll find that and other videos by subscribing to the Right to Reason YouTube channel. These videos are short excerpts from our weekly 2-hour podcast called The Right to Reason that you can find on iTunes, Stitcher, and PODBEAN, where we have discussions, interviews, and debates. You can also find out more about our show by visiting us on Twitter and Facebook or going to our website, therighttoreason.com.